Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gaudavani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Charane Trinadapi Sunichena Taradiva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Hare Nama Hare Nama Hare Namaiva Kevalam Kalo Nastyeva 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 Gatir Anyata Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hari Haraye Namaha Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopala Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudana Hari Haraye Namaha Hari Haraye Namaha Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Gopi Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Gopi Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Gopi Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari So yesterday was the celebration of Ganga Sagara. So tonight the class will be based entirely on Srimad Bhagavatam, excerpts that I pulled from Srimad Bhagavatam, glorifying Mother Ganga. She also is known as Ganga-devee and also as Bhagirathi. First, we all chant the 12-syllable mantra Prabhupada always chanted before speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And while we are doing this class, if any questions arise in your mind, please type that question in the chat box, and after my katha, I will address all those questions. Thank you very much. So the first verse glorifies Ganga. Nimna ganang yata Ganga, devanang achyuto yata, Vaishnavanang yata Shambhu, Purananam idang tata. Just as the Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, Lord Achyuta, supreme among deities, and Lord Shambhu, Shiva, the greatest of the Vaishnavas, so also Srimad Bhagavatam is the greatest of all Puranas. Then in the Uddhava Gita we find this line. Krishna tells Uddhava, Tirthanang Srotasang Ganga, among sacred and flowing things, I, Krishna, am the holy Ganges. Then there are other references to Ganga in Bhagavatam. O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Who can be worthy of the name of the Supreme Lord but the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna? Brahmaji collected the water emanating from the nails of his feet in order to award it to Lord Shiva as a worshipful welcome. This very water of the Ganges is purifying the whole universe, including Lord Shiva. The river Ganges, by which King Parikshit sat to fast, carries the most auspicious water, which is mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna and tulsi leaves. Therefore that water sanctifies the three worlds, inside and outside, and even sanctifies Lord Shiva and other demigods. Consequently, everyone who is destined to die must take shelter of this river. The blessed Lord Shiva becomes all the more blessed by bearing on his head the holy waters of the Ganges, which has as its source in the water that washed Lord Krishna's lotus feet. Krishna's feet act like thunderbolts hurled to shatter the mountain of sin stored in the mind of the meditating devotee. One should therefore meditate on the lotus feet of Krishna for a long time. Shukadeva Goswami said, My dear King Parikshit, Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, appeared as Vamana-dev in the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj. Then Vamana-dev extended his foot to the end of the universe and pierced a hole in its covering with the nail of his big toe. Through that hole, the pure water of the causal ocean entered this universe as the Ganges River. Having washed the lotus feet of Lord Vamana, which are covered with reddish powder, the water of the Ganges acquired a very beautiful pink color. Every living being can immediately purify his or her mind of material contamination by touching the transcendental water of the Ganges. Yet its waters remain ever pure. Because the Ganges directly touches the lotus feet of Lord Krishna before descending within this universe, she is known as Vishnu Padi. Later, she received other names like Ganga-devee and Bhagirathi. After 1,000 millenniums, the water of the Ganges descended upon Dhruva-loka, the topmost planet in this universe. Therefore, all learned sages and scholars proclaim Dhruva-loka to be Vishnu Pad, situated on Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. Dhruva Maharaj, the famous son of Maharaj Uttanapad, is known as the most exalted devotee of the Supreme Lord because of his firm determination in executing devotional service. Knowing that the sacred Ganges water washes the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, Dhruva Maharaj, situated on his own planet to this very day, accepts that water on his head with great devotion. Because Dhruva constantly thinks of Krishna very devoutly within the core of his heart, Dhruva is overcome with ecstatic anxiety. Tears flow from his half-open eyes, and eruptions appear on his entire body. The 7 great sages, Kashyapa, Atri, Vasishta, Vishvamitra, Gautama, Jamadagni, Bharadvaj, reside on planets beneath Dhruva-loka. Well aware of the influence of the water of the Ganges, to this day they keep Ganges water on the tufts of hair on their heads. They have concluded that this is the ultimate wealth, the perfection of all austerities, and the best means of prosecuting transcendental life. Having obtained uninterrupted devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they neglect all other beneficial processes like religion, economic development, sense gratification, and even merging into the Supreme. Just as Jnanis think that merging into the existence of the Lord is the highest truth, these 7 exalted personalities accept devotional service as the perfection of life. After purifying the 7 planets near Dhruva-loka, or the pole star, the Ganges water is carried through the spaceways of the demigods in billions of celestial airplanes. Then it inundates the moon, Chandraloka, and finally reaches Lord Brahma's abode atop Mount Meru. On top of Mount Meru, the Ganges divides into 4 branches, each of which gushes in a different direction: east, west, north, and south. These branches, known by the names Sita, Alakananda, Chakshu, and Bhadra, flow down into the ocean. The branch of the Ganges known as the Sita flows through Brahmapuri atop Mount Meru, and from there it runs down to the nearby peaks of the Kesarachala Mountains, which stand almost as high as Mount Meru itself. These mountains are like a bunch of filaments around Mount Meru. From the Kesarachala Mountains, the Ganges falls to the peak of Gandhamadana Mountain and then flows into the land of Bhadrashva Varsha. Finally, it reaches the ocean of salt water in the west. The branch of the Ganges, known as Chakshu, falls onto the summit of Malyavan Mountain, and from there cascades onto the land of Ketumala Varsha. The Ganges flows incessantly through Ketumala Varsha, and in this way also reaches the ocean of salt water in the west. The branch of the Ganges, known as Bhadra, flows from the northern side of Mount Meru. Its waters fall onto the peaks of Kumuda Mountain, Mount Nila, Shweta Mountain, and Sringavan Mountain in succession. Then it runs down into the province of Kuru, and after crossing through that land, flows into the saltwater ocean in the north. Similarly, the branch of the Ganges known as Alakananda flows from the southern side of Brahmapuri, passing over the tops of mountains in various lands. It falls down with fierce force upon the peaks of the mountains Hemakut and Himakut. After inundating the tops of those mountains, the Ganges falls down onto the tract of land known as Bharata Varsha, which she also inundates. Then the Ganges flows into the ocean of salt water in the south. Persons who come to bathe in this river are fortunate. It is not very difficult for them to achieve with every step the results of performing great sacrifices like Rajasuya and Ashvamedha Yagyas. Lord Shiva, the best of demigods, who carries on his forehead the emblem of the moon, receives upon his head with great devotion the Ganges water emanating from the toe of Vishnu. Being aware of religious principles, Bali Maharaj knew this. Consequently, following in the footsteps of Lord Shiva, he also placed on his head the water that had washed Vishnu's feet. O King Parikshit, the water from Lord Brahma's Kamandalu water pot washed the lotus feet of Lord Vamana, who is also known as Urukrama, the wonderful actor. Thus that water became so pure that it was transformed into the water of the Ganges, which went flowing down from the sky, purifying the three worlds like the pure fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here we understand that the Ganges began when the water from Lord Brahma's Kamandalu washed the lotus feet of Lord Vamana. But in the 5th canto it is stated that the Ganges began when Vamanadeva's left foot pierced the covering of the universe, so that the transcendental water of the causal ocean leaked through. And elsewhere it is also stated that Lord Narayana himself appeared as the water of the Ganges. The water of the Ganges, therefore, is a combination of 3 transcendental waters, and thus the Ganges is able to purify the 3 worlds. Continuing with quotes from Bhagavatam, "My dear Lord, you are the symbol of everything auspicious. Your transcendental name and fame is spread like a canopy all over the universe, including the higher, middle, and lower planetary systems. The transcendental water that washes your lotus feet is known in the higher planetary systems as the Mandakini River, in the lower planetary systems as the Bhagavatam, and in this earthly planetary system as the Ganga or Ganges. This sacred transcendental water flows throughout the entire universe, purifying wherever it goes." So now we're going to hear the famous story of how the Ganges became known as Bhagirati. This is found in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm sure you have heard, and I have also heard, other narrations of this narration of Bhagirati. And this Bhagavatam narration, because it's Bhagavatam, it is to be considered the most authoritative. Shukadeva Goswami continued, "The enemies of King Bahuka took away all his possessions, and therefore the king entered the order of Vanaprast and went to the forest with his wife. Bahuka died when he was old, and one of his wives wanted to die with him, following the sati rite. At that time, however, Aurava Muni, knowing her to be pregnant, forbade her to die. Knowing that she was pregnant, the co-wives of the wife of Bahuka conspired to give her poison with her food, but it did not act. Instead, the son was born along with the poison. Therefore, he became famous as Sagara, one who was born with poison. Sagara later became the emperor, and the place known as Ganga-sagara was excavated by his sons. Following the instructions of the great sage Aurava, Sagara Maharaj performed Ashvamedha sacrifices and thus satisfied the Supreme Lord, who is the supreme controller, the supersoul of all learned scholars, and the knower of all Vedic knowledge. But Indra, the king of heaven, stole the horse meant to be offered at the sacrifice. King Sagara had two wives, Sumati and Ishani. The sons of Sumati, who were very proud of their prowess and influence, following the order of their father, searched for the lost horse, and while doing so, they dug into the earth very extensively. Thereafter, in the northeastern direction, they saw the horse near the ashram of Muni Kapila-dev. "Oh, here is the man who has stolen the horse. He is staying there with closed eyes. Certainly he is very sinful. Kill him! Kill him!" Shouting like this, the sons of Sagara, 60,000 altogether, raised their weapons. And when they approached Lord Kapila, he opened his eyes. By the influence of Indra, the king of heaven, the sons of Sagara had lost their intelligence and thus disrespected the personality of Godhead, Kapila Muni. Consequently, fire emanated from their own bodies, and they were immediately burned to ashes. It is sometimes argued that the sons of King Sagara were burned to ashes by the fire emanating from the eyes of Kapila Muni. This statement, however, is not approved by great learned persons, for Kapila Muni's body is completely in the mode of pure goodness and therefore cannot manifest the mode of ignorance in the form of anger, just as the pure sky cannot be polluted by the dust of the earth. Kapila Muni enunciated in this material world the Sankhya philosophy, which is a strong boat with which to cross over the ocean of nations. Indeed, a person eager to cross the ocean of the material world may take shelter of this philosophy. In such a greatly learned person, situated on the elevated platform of transcendence, how can there be any distinction between enemy and friend? Among the sons of Sagara Maharaj was one named Asamanjasa, who was born from the king's second wife, Keshani. The son of Asamanjasa was known as Anshuman, and he was always engaged in working for the good of Sagara Maharaj, his grandfather. Formerly, in his previous birth, Asamanjasa had been a great mystic yogi, but by bad association, he had fallen from his exalted position. Now, in this life, he was born in a royal family and was a Jati Smara. That is, he had the special advantage of being able to remember his past birth. Nonetheless, he wanted to display himself as a miscreant, and therefore he would do things that were abominable in the eyes of the public and unfavorable to his relatives. He would disturb the boys sporting in the river Sarayu by throwing them into the depths of the water. And because Asamanjasa engaged in such abominable activities, his father gave up affection for him and had him exiled. Then Asamanjasa exhibited his mystic power by reviving the boys and showing them to the king and their parents. After this, Asamanjasa left Ayodhya. O King Parikshit, when all the inhabitants of Ayodhya saw that their boys had come back to life, they were astounded, and King Sagara greatly lamented the absence of his son. Thereafter, Anshuman, the grandson of Maharaj Sagara, was ordered by the king to search for the horse. Following the same path traversed by his uncles, Anshuman gradually reached the stack of ashes and found the horse nearby. The great Anshuman saw the sage named Kapila-Dev, the saint who is an incarnation of Vishnu, sitting there by the horse. Anshuman offered him respectful obeisances, folded his hands, and offered Kapila-Dev prayers with great attention. O King Parikshit, when Anshuman had glorified Kapila-Dev in this way, the great sage, the powerful incarnation of Vishnu, being very merciful to him, explained to him the path of knowledge. O my dear Anshuman, here is the animal sought by your grandfather for sacrifice. Please take it. As for your forefathers, who have been burnt to ashes, they can be delivered only by Ganges water and not by any other means. Thereafter, Anshuman circumambulated Kapila Muni and offered him respectful obeisances, bowing his head. After fully satisfying Kapila-dev in this way, Anshuman brought back the horse meant for sacrifice, and with this horse, Maharaj Sagara performed the remaining ritualistic ceremonies. After delivering charge of his kingdom to Anshuman, and thus being freed from all material anxiety and bondage, Sagara Maharaj, following the means instructed by Aurava Muni, achieved the supreme destination of returning to the spiritual world. King Anshuman, like his grandfather, performed austerities for a very long time. Nonetheless, he could not bring the Ganges to this material world, and thereafter, in due course of time, he died. Like Anshuman himself, Dilipa, his son, was unable to bring the Ganges to this material world, and he also became a victim of death in due course of time. Then Dilipa's son, Bhagirath, performed very severe austerities to bring the Ganges to this material world. Thereafter, Mother Ganges appeared before King Bhagirath and said, "I am very much satisfied with your austerities, and am now prepared to give you benedictions as you desire." Being thus addressed by Ganga-devee, Mother Ganges, the king bowed his head before her and explained his desire. Mother Ganges replied, "So, when I fall from the sky to the surface of the planet Earth, the water will certainly be very forceful. Who will sustain that force? If I am not sustained, I shall pierce the surface of the earth and go down to Rasatala, the Patala area of the universe. O king, I do not wish to go down to planet Earth, for there the people in general will bathe in my water to clean themselves of the reactions of their sinful deeds. When all these sinful reactions accumulate in me, how shall I become free from them? You must consider this very carefully." Bhagirath then said, "Those who are saintly because of devotional service, and who are therefore in the renounced order, free from material desires, and who are pure devotees, expert in following the regulative principles mentioned in the Vedas, are always glorious and pure in behavior, and are able to deliver all fallen souls. When such pure devotees bathe in your water, the sinful reactions accumulated from other people will certainly be counteracted, for such devotees always keep in the core of their hearts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can vanquish all sinful reactions. Like a cloth woven of threads, extending for its length and breadth, this entire universe, in all its latitude and longitude, is situated under different potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Shiva is a guna avatar of Krishna, and thus he represents the super soul in the embodied soul. He can sustain your forceful waves on his head." After saying this, Bhagirath then satisfied Lord Shiva by performing austerities. O King Parikshit, Lord Shiva was very quickly satisfied with Bhagirath. When King Bhagirath approached Lord Shiva and requested him to sustain the forceful waves of the Ganges, Lord Shiva accepted the proposal by saying, "Let it be so." Then, with great attention, Lord Shiva sustained the Ganges on his head, for the water of the Ganges is purifying, having emanated from the toes of Lord Vishnu. The great and saintly King Bhagirath brought the Ganges, which can deliver all the fallen souls to that place on earth where the bodies of his forefathers lay burnt to ashes. Bhagirath mounted a swift chariot and drove before Mother Ganges, who followed him, purifying many countries, until they reached the ashes of Bhagirath's forefathers, the sons of Sagara, who were thus sprinkled with water from the Ganges. Because the sons of Sagara Maharaj had offended Lord Kapila, the heat of their bodies had increased, and they were burnt to ashes. But simply by being sprinkled with water from the Ganges, all of them became eligible to go to the heavenly planets. What then is to be said of those who use the water of Mother Ganges to worship her? Simply by having water from the Ganges come in contact with the ashes of their burnt bodies, the sons of Sagara Maharaj were elevated to the heavenly planets. Therefore, what is to be said of a devotee who worships Mother Ganges faithfully with a determined vow? One can only imagine the benefit that accrues to such a devotee. Because Mother Ganges emanates from the lotus toe of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Anantadev, she is able to liberate one from material bondage. Therefore, whatever is described herewith about her is not at all wonderful. Great sages, completely freed from material lusty desires, devote their minds fully to the service of Krishna. Such persons are liberated from material bondage without difficulty, and they become transcendentally situated, acquiring the spiritual quality of the Lord. This is the glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, Krishna, is extremely difficult for unintelligent men who accept Krishna as impersonal or void, which he is not. Krishna is therefore understood and sung about by pure devotees. I'm dedicating these Nrsimha prayers to all of you so that you are protected from COVID-19, COVID-20, COVID-21, 22, 23, and 24. May Krishna bless you and protect you. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlada Klada Dayani. Prahlada Klada Dayani. Hiranya Kashipura Vaksha. Hiranya Kashipura Vaksha. Shila Tankana Kalaye Shilatanga Nakalaye Iko Nrsingha Parato Nrsingha Yato Yato Yamita To Nrsingha Bahir Nrsingha Hridaya Nrsingha Bahir Nrsingha Hridaya Nrsingha Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye Tavakara Kamala Varenakam Adbhuta Sringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Tavakara Kamala Varenakam Adbhuta Sringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadish Jai Jagadish Jai Jagadisha Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare